When I was living in New York City during the pandemic, one day I was on my way to buy groceries, and there was a guy who is standing across the street and just yelled at me, "Yo, you Chinese weirdos, go back to your country. You don't belong here."
Toward me, for the 5 years I have been in Belgium, there were so many things. There was that time in the train, a white boy said, "Oh, it smelled like monkey here," while looking at me. Like he said it as a joke, but we all know that it wasn't funny. At school, whenever the classroom will get dark, someone will say, "Oh, where is Vicky? She disappeared." Still not funny. They often say, "Oh, Vicky, why are you so plain?" When black girls are so sexy, with big boobs and all. Or maybe, "Since you're black, Vicky, you should know how to twerk or how to suck dicks." I can sleep with a black girl, but I will not go out with a black girl. Like, they're so troublesome and noisy. They get mad every time for no reason.
I hate myself. Let me explain. This has been a really hard week, and not because of all the hate crimes, not because of the war in Myanmar, not because of the suicides of the farmers in India and the loss of bio and cultural diversity and global destruction. No, it's much more pathetic, more personal. It's a realization of all the internalized garbage from my life. This conversation you're about to hear is heavily edited. What you're about to listen to is a reduction of the full conversation between two men, and you might think that it's just a very simple, harmless conversation. But it was so difficult to process to listen, because it was so real and too close. There are moments where we would describe a traumatic experience and it's followed by laughter. This is symptomatic of racialized people, a protection mechanism for our sanity, to forget and to let go. But I'm starting to see how problematic this all can be, how we perpetuate and repress the violence. I used it so much for my own life until I realized it's working, until now that Asians remains as the butt of all jokes. I've removed parts of our own joking and laughter to share with you the essence of the message and the feeling. This was a hard conversation to bring to you. I tried to reduce to the essence in hope that you will listen, because it was difficult for me to even listen. I know that I wanted to look away. I wanted to not see the pain, not see the ugliness in myself and in others. This is my preface, and I hope you can forgive me for my rough editing and packaging. This conversation is with Junshin Soga. He's an actor, director, and playwright based in New York City. He writes mostly about the gay Asian experiences, confronting racism and misconceptions, touching the subjects of solitude, sex, and mortality. His play, One Fine Day, was nominated for the 2017 New York Innovative Theater Award for Best Original Script, and in Dreams, premiered and participated in the 2017 New York Summerfest Theater Festival. Junshin was raised in Hiroshima and works on projects collecting and telling stories from the atomic bomb survivors. He has been touring among cities between Japan and the United States with Hoshiwa Miteiru, a memoir of a mother, Toshie Fujino, whose son was killed in the event. He recently starred in a short film, The Chicken, which premiered at the 73rd Locarno Film Festival, and it has been screened in many film festivals around the world. Junshin?
Hey, what's up?
Hey, man.
How's it going? How do I sound?
You sound great. Yeah. And now I'm speaking with Junshin, just outside of Hiroshima, Japan. How has it been for you back in Hiroshima over this period of contemplation?
It's good and bad. I mean, it's been very hard working on unresolved family shit. It was very stressful, and there were moments where I felt torn apart, but I do see improvements. Things are getting better for sure. I feel pretty good at the moment. I had a lot of free time, so I've been walking around the village. I'm from a very small village in Hiroshima. I've been taking long walks, looking at stuff, finding things, and lots of thinking. And I've been writing.
So you shared with me, that was one of the first things you shared with me, which is your new script that you've been working on. And
Yes, I sent you immediately.
immediately, yeah, yes.
Yeah,
And
as soon as you said, hey, you want to do this podcast, I was like, okay, here's my script.
yeah. And there's definitely so much in the script that
Yeah.
I really connect with you, and it immediately hit me, and I totally understand what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say. Before we get to that, I wanted to just share how I came across you and what I thought when I first saw you on Instagram, because despite both of us being in New York and LA, but we didn't actually cross paths physically yet.
No.
We connected through, I guess, our interlink was kind of Lulu, but it was no official introduction. It was just perhaps algorithmically we were linked.
Yeah.
But for me, when I
Yeah.
saw your Instagram, I instantly felt a kinship and understanding through just quick browsing. And I'm also going through this period of reflection and dealing with a lot of pain and trauma. A big part of this podcast and a big part of my own exploration is looking at, first of all, a very personal thing, which is what it's like and the experiences of Asian masculinity in this world, in this contemporary world that we live in.
Right.
And by that, I don't really want to even simplify East or West Asia or United States or European or any of these kind of constructs, because I think so much of it are resting on old constructions of myth, the myths of nationalism, myths of different cultures. And another thing that we hit on immediately, even in the pre-interview, was the discussion about sexuality, about sexual identity. So I think those are all the things that we will go through and cover.
Sure.
I remember an image of you I saw, which is you floating in the river with your long hair. And it was, for me, a kind of a mirror. And I saw myself in some ways, and I felt a desire to connect. And I reached out to you, and you immediately sent me your script.
Yes. I think it was like literally immediately. Like you direct messaged me on Instagram. You were like, would you be interested in joining my podcast? And it was like within 3 minutes, I think. I was like, all right, here's my script. Because it was like the perfect timing. Like you reached out to me right when I finished the first draft.
Bitter and Sweet is a new script by Junshin. It's a two-person play featuring Ken, a gay Japanese man, in his 40s, living in New York City, born in the United States and has moved between Japan and the US in his youth. The other, Eric, a straight white man, late 20s, early 30s grad student at Columbia University. He majors gender, sexuality, and psychology. He's very well put together and gives out positive vibes, but has a traumatic past. Eric finds Ken on Grindr, a gay dating app, looking for someone to interview for his study. Ken was on Grindr looking for someone to talk to. Eric explained to Ken his project, and Ken agreed and invited Eric up to his apartment. It's 8 p.m, windy, chilly, November. The seemingly friendly nature of the construct and conversation explodes eventually, as the violence of politeness and niceness reveals itself to one another. It's often pointed out by racialized people that people who declare themselves racist easier to deal with than liberals who claim they are not. Unintentional racism is insidious. Even when subtle, it's destructive. Can you tell us a bit about the energy behind the story, and what was the driving force and inspiration behind this play, Bitter and Sweet?
The energy is probably pure anger. The need to let this anger inside of me be seen by others. That I think that was the strong element that kept me going with this script. And another thing is longing for connection. This is a strong desire to connect with people. I started writing this script because I was writing another script. A friend who lives in Tokyo asked me to write a 2-actors play, and I started writing a script in Japanese, which was about 2 brothers. I do this all the time. Like whenever I write, I have to work on like 2 pieces at the same time so that I can go back and forth. I can't focus on just one play because I get stuck easily. So I get stuck with one script, then I switch to another one, and then I work on it, and then I switch back to the first one.
So maybe that's an interesting way for us to also go about this discussion. The other script that you just sent me, unfortunately, this morning I didn't have time to really go through it. Can you give me a quick synopsis to catch me up to speed with that?
And by the way, the one I sent you, that's not the script that I was working on.
Yes.
That I've been working on. The one I sent you was a play that I finished writing in 2016, and I performed it in theater in 2017. It's called One Fine Day. It's a one-man show about a gay, middle-aged Asian man who's lost. And he's out for a walk on one very cold day in the morning, and he receives a call from his mother to find out that his grandfather has just passed away. His mother asks, "Are you going to be able to make it to the funeral?" And he says, "Yes, sure." And then he hangs up and he starts to walk back to his apartment so that he can book his flight. But at one corner, to be specific, at 11th Street and Avenue B, where he needs to turn left, he decides to turn right because he wants to take a little detour for no reason. He just want to like walk before he books the flight. And he starts walking. He keeps thinking about things that are completely irrelevant to his grandfather's death. Credit card bills, job. He works at a restaurant and he talks shit about annoying customers that he has to deal with. He talks about them in his head. He revisits the moment where he comes out to his mother. All these random things until a lot of lost memories start to come back to him. He relives his past, different moments that had strong impacts to his life. And at the very end, it starts to rain and he's tired and he's like in Chinatown because he's walking south. He's in Chinatown, really far from his apartment, and it's raining. And he's like, "Fuck, I can't keep going anymore." And that moment, he goes see his dead grandfather in his mind. It's all happening in his head. He visits his grandfather who he couldn't say goodbye to, and then he asks questions like, "What do you think about every day? Like, how do you feel spending time alone in a home?" And at the end, he says, "Grandpa, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't come say goodbye to you before you died." And he tells him, "I really love you."
I can really understand these stories. It feels very much of Asian diaspora, the distance, dealing with these emotions and feelings. A quick dive in, going back to the first script, one of the first parts that had me laugh out loud was when you commented about Ken Watanabe.
Yes.
And I love that confrontational discussion. For me, it's Ken Watanabe also represents so many things, so many aspects of Asianness to white people, right? And it's not even that Ken Watanabe is so bad. No, it's not that I have such a problem with Buddhism, with Zen, or with yoga or incense. In itself, they're just things.
Yeah.
Can you speak a bit about the anger, and also when you in the the script in the character says, you know what, fuck Ken Watanabe, he's a shit actor, I hate him.
Yeah.
Can you speak about that anger and this kind of feeling, and perhaps living in the United States and having perhaps these kinds of conversations?
Yeah, it's frustrating, like I'm an actor. And so I go to castings. I mean, I don't go to castings because there aren't many, but there's this expectation, like everybody's talking about it nowadays, like when they're looking for a Japanese actor, they're looking for a particular thing. And, they want you to be good at sword fight, and they want you to kind of behave different from other characters. Oh, he's a Japanese character, so he should be a certain way. And I think Ken Watanabe is like the example. He's what people are looking for. Is how it feels to me, And when I see him in movies, I really think it has a bad impact. Not that he's the worst, I think it's better than how it used to be, because at least he's somewhat cool, I guess.
Sometimes the only way to heal our wounds is to make peace with the demons who created them.
You really believe that?
Don't you?
This is a scene from the Hollywood version of Godzilla, with Ken Watanabe playing Dr. Ishiro Serizawa. There's nothing so terrible of his acting or roles per se in general. However, it perpetuates and reduces the idea of Asians as this one single-dimensional character that forever speaks with this specific, quote, Japanese accent, a perpetual foreigner, the calm Zen master of the East.
Nature always has a real balancing itself. The only question is, what part will we play?
Did you just make that up?
No. I read it in a fortune cookie once. A really long fortune cookie.
He doesn't look cool to me, but he's not the ones with camera hanging on his neck and, glasses with like teeth sticking out and saying like things that don't make sense.
This is a scene from Breakfast at Tiffany's, the film where Audrey Hepburn hangs on the walls of many white young girls as the iconic idea of a woman. Actor Mickey Rooney plays Mr. Yunioshi, performing his infamous yellow face with makeup and prosthetic mouthpiece to caricature a Japanese man.
What happened to you anyway? You take off for the powder room and that's the last I see you.
Now, really, Harry?
Harry was the other guy. I'm Sid Arbuck. You like me, remember?
Mr. Goldrightry, I protest!
Oh, darling, I am sorry, but I lost my key.
But that was 2 weeks ago. You cannot go on or keep ringing my bell. You disturb me. You must have a key made.
But it won't do any good. I just lose them all.
Come on, baby. You like me. You know you do.
I worship you, Mr. Arbuck, but good night, Mr.
Hold on,
Arbuck.
baby. Wait a minute. What is this? You like me. I'm a liked guy. You like me, baby. You know you do.
In 30 seconds, I got to call the police. All the time a disturbance. I cannot sleep. I got to get to my rest. I'm an artist. I got to call a bike squad on you.
Don't be angry, you dear little man. I won't do it again. You promised not to be angry. I might let you take those pictures we mentioned.
When?
Sometime.
Anytime.
Good night.
He's a step forward from that, but man, the way he's described by this character Ken in my new script is he's Zen, martial arts. What else does he say? Face always still, minimal movement. It's dehumanized. It's Japanese people minus emotion. It's a Japanese character without all the human nuances, That's how Japanese people may look from far away, but if you care to take a step forward and really communicate and get to know Japanese people, they're not that emotionless. They're not that still. They're not squared. I have a friend who's trying to convince me to change the name though, and I'm tempted to do that.
Of Ken
Yeah,
Watanabe?
he's like a big figure in Hollywood and Japan. He's like nowadays he's like one of the producers whenever they make something with a lot of Japanese cast, you know. So he has a lot of influence. So like to stab him like that in public is not going to be good for my career.
Which I find is another aspect about the hindrance of speaking the truth. I feel that in today's world, we are so afraid because as we become more financially problematic in this system, we are losing the ability to be critical. And this is for me also the anger that comes with all of this toxic positivity, that we are always having to be polite. We have to not say the wrong things and not, even when we are being constantly attacked and our ability to be ourselves are completely strangling us, yet we are so afraid to speak up against the injustice.
Yeah.
How does sexuality for you play into all of this?
Oh, it's like the most important thing, isn't it? Sexuality is like a big part of us, right? You live your life thinking about sex all the time. I mean, not everybody, but I think a lot of people do think about sex all the time, or a lot of, they spend a lot of time in their days thinking about sex. Yeah, I'm gay, and being gay has a lot of influence on my choices, the way I live, the way I look at people, the way I choose my words. Being gay, I had to deal with things I wouldn't have had to had I not been gay. A lot of things that I've studied, read, watched, I was interested in them because I was gay. It's a big thing for me, at least. My sexuality is very important to me. And that's why every play I write, there's a gay character in it.
Do you think that has something to do with a compensation with the society you live in? Can you give a comparison between New York, LA, or Hiroshima about sexuality in society, and where do you relate to that?
What it's like to be gay in each places?
Yeah. And how do you feel the society treats sexuality?
I feel pretty much the same everywhere I am because I'm out, I'm open. I know a lot of gay people who don't tell their family or friends or sometimes nobody, the society. Wherever you go, I think being gay is hard. Even if I don't engage with people who are extremely homophobic, I can't think of anybody who gave me any like strong negative comments about me being gay since I came out. But before I came out, it was a different story, It's hard to spend a day without running into somebody saying things like, ooh, like negative, something negative about homosexuality. Before I came out, it was really, really difficult. And now I came out when I was around 27, so it was pretty late. And I didn't tell people because I was afraid, right? I wasn't confident that I can protect myself if people responded negatively. I felt if I told people, people could crash me into pieces. That's why I didn't tell people. It had a huge negative impact on my life because I stayed in closet for so long. I feel like I've missed out. You're in high school and everybody else is dating and they're talking about boys or girls. And I was just like listening and watching them have all the fun. And, I was working really, really hard not to let my sexuality slip out. That's how I spent my teenage era, which is really sad, I think. I really wish when I was a teenager, I really wish there were more movies or plays or books or stories, something. I wish I had access to gay stories, And I think that's why I cannot write anything that doesn't have gay characters, because I don't think there are enough of that.
I keep coming back to this statement that I hear a lot in society. Men only think through their dick. I like to examine a lot of times in society the ideas of rank. Who has more rank in what situation? And in the current times, when one comes out being gay, it's a new kind of rank. So it's really wrong for most settings these days to shame people for being gay openly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I see that is not at all the case, that the homophobia has disappeared. In fact, it's just more undercover.
Yeah.
And one of these things is when women say, or anybody say, oh, you're only thinking through your dick. And I find that it's a very covert, very nasty kind of attack.
Yeah. They're simplifying the problem so that they don't have to face the real problem.
Yes. What would you say is the real problem here?
Oh, it depends. When human relationships, you cannot have any relationship with anybody without problems.
Yes.
Especially when you're in a romantic relationship, whether you're gay or straight, there are problems that sometimes come from childhood trauma, difference of financial situation, status in society, a lot of inconvenient things that needs to be discussed. But whenever there's a disagreement, it's really easy to say, oh, well, men just think with their dick and that's the cause of it. It simplifies the problem and you can just blame it on the dick and move on without really confronting the actual problem.
Yeah, I suspect that there's also a lot of negativity around the idea of pleasure and arousal, and particularly on the pleasure of men, because as a society we do not wish to have a class of people, especially the working class, to busy themselves with pleasure. You should be working, you should be doing and providing, and nothing is more offensive than being gay, where you are not making a family, not providing, not it's something so ugly that and I think this goes back to aspects of the current society's relation with homophobia. That is a useless man.
No, I thought about it. Where does homophobia come from? And homophobia, it was spread through the spread of Christianity, the Catholic Church, the Christian guilt. Because before Christianity came to Japan, homosexuality was very common in Japan. I see the same things in many places. And my answer was they didn't want the farmers to be having sex while working. That's why they put so much shame in homosexuality, was my conclusion. You know what I'm saying? Because, they don't have cameras. They can't be watching everybody when they're working at not just farms, but I'm talking about before the industrial revolution, And back then, it was not common for both men and women to be working. So the men would go outside and work, right? And if men were allowed to have sex, I feel like a lot of men would had sex instead of working when nobody's watching, right? So you go to farm, don't touch another man, just work and go home and fuck your wife. I think homophobia was created by those who wanted to control the workers.
As an openly gay man in the US, speaking a bit about the current situation with the pandemic and all the anti-Asian hate, we also touched on this discussion about the difference of experiences between Asian men and Asian women.
Yeah.
What are some of your observations about that?
I think first we need to talk about the fact that over hundreds of years, most of Asia were occupied by Europe. Europe colonized most Asian countries. We inherited culturally white supremacy. So there's that. Then we worry so much about how we are seen by white people.
Right.
And somehow in Occidental, in the West, female Asians were romanticized to be almost like an ideal wife. And they make associations with geisha, and they're seeing very sexual and attractive and tidy and polite, and they respect the man. That's how Asian female has been portrayed or have been seen in the West. On the other hand, when it comes to Asian male, they were portrayed in such negative ways. You can't forget the fact that there were like 3 really big wars in Asia: the Vietnamese War and the Korean War and World War II. So you see Asian soldiers, right, as enemy. And if I speak just about United States, like Asian face is associated with enemy. Yeah, there was this like huge campaign to just help people not feel so bad watching Asian soldiers being killed.
I mean, that goes back so much further too, like the Opium Wars. There's 2 Opium Wars before that. The invention of Yellow Peril, the British guilt.
Yeah, the whole Yellow Peril thing, yeah. Yeah, I feel like Japanese men, in the eyes of white man, were seen as enemy or somebody you need to compete with, like economically too. I think that created the culture of portraying Asian men in such negative way. Inferior, stupid, emotionless, rude, eccentric, not human. They don't think like you and they don't feel like you. It's really problematic.
Yeah, I see that the 2 extremes of it is really the same thing. One is when people fetishize us.
Yeah.
Or when they see us as animals or not human.
Yeah.
Is both equally offensive and upsetting because it's serving their fantasy.
Yeah, it ignores who you are.
The fantasy of someone lower than you or someone that is so evil, and that's also a thrill of someone dark and mysterious or full of untapped power. It's the same. I see what happens with the black community, where people would also exaggerate this idea of the scary black man, but then also becomes a sexual fantasy. What's unbearable is the result of the white guilt. For example, Yellow Peril was started because there was an article written about what the British did in terms of pushing opium onto the Chinese and also the Indians, and thereby enslaving the people and forcing them for certain trade agreements and later on full-on war and abuse. And because of that, they couldn't bear their guilt and guilty conscience. And then that's when they invented the Yellow Peril to make it seem like that the Asians are the enemies.
Yeah.
This whole either or, this extremity is so prevalent. And I find it so common even till today. It's still so extremely common. And the current unbearableness is the inability to talk about it. Is that if you speak about such a thing, if you speak about Asian masculinity, if you speak all these things, and of course it's up to the people who listens to this to educate themselves about all the different things like model minority myth, Yellow Peril, and there's all these different ways that Asians are silenced. But as an Asian man, how is it for you growing up? You went to school in Japan?
I did, yeah. I was born in Hawaii and then I came to Japan when I was 7. And from 7 to 29, I was in Japan.
What was your relationship with white people?
In Japan?
In Japan, yeah.
Well, I came to my village and people treated me like a foreigner because everybody knew I came back from Hawaii. Everybody else in the village, they're from the village. I hated it because, when you're small, you want to be like everybody else. You want to have the same thing. And it was really hard to feel like I'm different at such young age. My grandma told me about this incident where a guy just innocently asked me to say a word in English, and I started crying and ran back home, and then I burnt every clothes that had alphabet on it. So that's how life in Japan started. And I had a rough childhood, as long as human relationship wise, I had friends, but it was weird friendship. I never felt I was part of anything, which I guess I kept with me. I still feel that way a lot of times. Around the time I was 12, kids start to listen to American pop music, rock music. It was first Michael Jackson, and then Green Day was big, Oasis, Blur. Kids are listening to American music, and I felt threatened. I was like, I'm American. I should be listening to these music more than everybody else. I really wanted to be ahead of everybody when it comes to being familiar with American culture. That was my early teenage time. And then this is kind of important. Around high school time, I started feeling really bad about looking Asian. It felt like being in a tragedy, it felt like a curse. I started to feel like it's a curse on me to look not white, and without knowing why. I had no idea why I felt that way, but when I was young, I had such thirst for American culture. Everything American felt superior, just better, good. And everything Japanese felt dull, banal, inferior, not sophisticated. I just remember not just once, looking at myself in the mirror, feeling like I'm in a nightmare. That's my teenage era. I went to Wisconsin for 1 year as an exchange student. And I was very popular because I was super loud and funny. It was forced. I had this huge pressure to be funny and popular. So I didn't have sense of self back then. I was a clown. I was always looking for things that would please people. I was very successful with it. I was the homecoming king in a high school in Wisconsin. But then it crashed. After 3 or 4 months, my memory is vague, but it crashed. And the rest of the year was pretty sad and lonely. I had a few really good friends, but the popular kid I couldn't keep up with that clown, being a clown thing.
Why did it crash? How did you reach that point?
Because I wasn't being myself. Nothing was coming from my own personal need, I wasn't doing things I wanted to do, or I was always thinking about how people feel around me. There were other Asian kids in high school. I really didn't want people to think that I was one of them. So I was working really hard to prove to everybody that I'm cooler than other Asian kids. It's that mentality where a white person say when I see you, I don't see black. You're just a neighbor, kind of. When I see you, I don't see an Asian guy. You're just a friend. And yeah, I remember some kids would literally tell me you're different. You're not you're not like other Japanese kids, or you're not like other Asians that I know. You're different from all the Asian people that I know. And I used to take it as a compliment. Without feeling weird about it, I was like, yes, it's working.
Taking this comment as a compliment. I don't see color. I don't see you as Asian. You're different than the other Asians. How many times have I experienced this in my own life? Am I just as much as a culprit as those who said this to me? I too, with my own internalized racism, wanted to steer away from the other Asians. The stories of Thai or Filipino parents telling their kids, don't speak about Asian issues such as anti-China sentiments. The whites might think that you're one of them, one of the Chinese, or any of the other lower sections of the Asian class. The idea of a colorblind society leaves us without the language to discuss race and examine our own biases. It precludes that this systemic racism doesn't exist. And if we can't talk about it, we cannot change it. The hurt of the well-intentional white, the need for society to maintain the comfort, those holding oppression and keeping privilege invisible, while simultaneously furthering violence and oppression. Yes, learning from the last third of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech that his own kids judges the content of their character, not the color of their skin. But do we replace non-judgment for one's color with non-empathy? I have the same story. I worked so hard. I integrated so well. But the truth is, you will never be white. Whatever other thing you're trying to pretend to be. This is one of the most insensitive and I'd rather you call me a chink. I'd rather you call me some other thing that at least you see me and you recognize whatever the hate you have. But I find this is one of the most upsetting, invisible, insensitive forms of racism that is so common and that people think that they have. I hear this all the time. I don't see you as Asian.
Yeah. I hope they know better though. If you're talking about people in United States, I feel like this has been talked about aggressively the past 1 year.
Yeah, I'm not sure if people get that or not. I'm not so certain. I really am not so certain that people really understand.
And I feel like I could see that happening more often in Europe though, because a lot of people from Europe, when they talk about racism, they think it's like solved, you know.
Yes, they think it's an American problem. All of this is just an American problem.
Yeah. They would come to US and they say like, oh my God, Americans are so racist. And I'm like, oh, your country is not. And they're like, yeah, like you come to my country and then you watch the news and like bullshit, you know. You're just conveniently ignoring it because it makes you feel better. But people who are not white are actually facing racism every day. I like United States because at least you can talk about racism without feeling bad.
Like being gaslit, told that you're not feeling what you're feeling.
Yeah, especially after Black Lives Matter, it's even better. Like before Black Lives Matter, I had situations in New York where I confronted racism and people would look at me like, oh, who's this like oversensitive Asian guy? You know, he's gonna get mad at everything. And then I'm like, yeah, of course. I confront racism and I'm this guy who gets mad at everything.
I get that in Europe, in Germany all the time. And now I am seen as an angry person. And it's like, you try this. You try not to be angry. And I'm not even angry at those situations. I'm actually quite calm with all of this stuff. And I could, when I'm at home, I'm reading and learning and thinking, it's just like, yeah, it sucks. I'm kind of more bored because it's my whole life. But the anger is when I speak to a nice German, a nice European who's friendly, and they think, no, I'm not racist. Why are you so angry? Why do you believe this? No, just calm down, just relax. It's not that bad. This gets me so angry. There's another thing about white Europeans is Asian Europeans, Asians who are here. The pain is that it reminds me of a younger me. The me, like the one that you described in Wisconsin, that was better than the others, that is not aware of myself and that is trying to fit in and makes the problem even worse for other people. And is not aware.
Yeah, you know, they used to say, if you want to succeed in this world, you need to know how to work with the white man. That's like still pretty relevant, sadly. Yeah. I was gonna say, because you talked about your anger and it sounded genuine, you know, that's probably why you like this script so much.
Yes. Can you talk about being gay Asian man in New York and in LA, just to continue the Wisconsin trajectory between high school, being the homecoming king in Wisconsin, to coming out of the closet at the age of 27?
Well, The best thing that happened to my life was I decided to become an actor and I actually pursued it. So I don't know how much racism had or how much my sexuality had to it, but my life until 19 was pretty hard. I had a lot of pain, a lot of confusion. I learned how to be the popular kid. I learned how to make friends. I learned how to behave normal, but it was all a facade. I didn't know how to be me. I didn't understand people, and I felt misunderstood the whole time. And I really think that's why I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to understand people. I felt if I understood people a little better, things would make more sense to me. And it helped. My life from 19 to 29 was all about acting. I really did it in the academic way. I loved taking classes. I loved reading scripts. I loved analyzing characters. I loved watching people. I loved talking about psychology, human behaviors. There's so much to talk about when it comes to acting and like what I've done from 19 to 29. But to put it simply, was that 10 year was about trying to be a good actor, trying to have better understanding of human beings.
I'm curious about also seeing you, if you had to reach this, maybe when you were 29 coming out. And for me, this coming out, for me, I don't identify so easily and so simply as just, I'm gay and that's it, leave me alone, fuck off. But I have, with my own sexuality, the complexity of it, I don't really have one single term except for being queer, but that can be so large, and which I also like.
Yeah.
It's so complicated, but in general, it is this sense of just I don't function and don't agree with most people and the way they see things.
Yeah.
And I'm no longer playing that.
Those terms, it's really there to simplify who we are so that we can have order in our life. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as people are given the choice to be different when they don't want to be categorized.
I think I just haven't found that quick explanation for myself.
No, I'm like you, like I just tell people that I'm gay because it just cuts all the explanation, and I don't want to I don't want to go through the whole like I used to like girls, or like sometimes I watch straight porn. I don't know why. Sometimes I don't know whether I'm looking at the girl or the guy. I really like watching girl like skirting. I don't know why.
Yes.
It's all these like all these things that are very inexplainable. So you just tell people, "Oh, I'm gay," and they just like write their own stories about me, and I'm fine.
Which they will do anyway.
Yeah. I'm like, go ahead.
It's faster this way.
Yeah, write your story, because I do write the story about you
yes,
in my head too. So it's like vice versa.
Yes.
We will, if we decide to become closer, we will talk about it.
Yeah, that's really that. I mean, that is, I think, the point is that the uncomfortable truth that people don't actually want to know each other.
Well, I think I don't want to be seen. I don't think I don't want to get to know each other with this person. I think it's more like I'm really scared to be seen by this person.
That's my fear for becoming an actor.
Yeah, you know what? Being an actor is hard, especially if you want to do a good job with it. You do have to put yourself in the most vulnerable place where you cannot lie. If you lie, people will see you lying.
There's one image in your script that comes to mind is I think at the beginning, where the guy comes over and the Asian man has on his walls a picture of a man masturbating, wanking.
Yeah. I don't want my friends to be bringing their kids to my apartment. That's why I have a naked man jerking off on my wall.
It's so great. I think it's I also want something like that.
Also, later on, do you like kids? Eric asks Ken. Ken says, it reminds me of everything that I can never have in this life.
But this line is very important. It reminds me of everything I cannot have.
Yeah.
It really resonates with me. There's another podcast that I listen to Feeling Asian, also people in Asians in New York. One of the co-hosts, she also posts a lot of funny Instagram things, and they're pretty edgy too. And one of them is quite funny. That it's a series that she has, which is things that aren't racist but feels like they're racist. And there's a whole series of these funny things, and it's also meant to be a bit comedic. White couples jogging. And it's it's
the most mundane thing, right? It's
it's so it's like like, and it's also, and I like the premise, things that are not racist but feels racist.
yeah, it's so innocent. There's nothing offensive
Yeah,
about it, but it's like the wellness, the activity of wellness. Yeah.
Yes, oh my god, maybe we can talk about this because I fucking hate wellness.
You watch like white couple jogging and they must eat a lot of avocados and they must have they must drink kale smoothies and like they have a puppy, they live in a park
oh my
slope.
god. Yeah, I think this is good, and I want to be able to say it so for the white listeners, and this is I always want to be a bit more careful.
They're gonna be pissed. They're gonna be
no I mean I think
we can't even jog.
yeah that's the thing.
That's not the point.
I wonder if you have this ability too. Like, I feel like we have a whole lifetime of cultivating patience, and this is where I get even more upset when people say, wow, you are so angry, you don't have control of your emotion. Then it's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, fuck you. My whole life is trying to be calm and explain these things.
You know, when people say that to you, I would say to them, you don't have control over your emotion. You have control over your action. And I have perfect control over my action. I'm choosing to fucking confront you with what you do and what you say because it's wrong.
How is it for you living back in Japan in this particular round that you have gone through so many different periods and transitions?
I don't struggle with that at all. I'm never scared to say what I think, even in Japan. And even if I know what I'm going to say is going to be somewhat offensive or be disagreeing, I say it. And I have developed a really good technique to say it the way that's easier for people to receive.
Can you share your technique?
Well, it's almost an unconscious thing. It's something that developed throughout 20 years, 30 years of living in Japan and struggling with people. I've struggled a lot with people, but I think it's in my voice. I think it's in my behavior. I think it's in my smile, or sometimes I feel like I make a sincere face. I try to listen really well, and I try to let the people know that I am really listening to them, and I try my best to let them feel like they're understood. And the most important thing is to let them know that I'm not trying to fight them. This kind of thing is important not only in Japan. I don't want to call it technique, because when you call it technique, then it sounds like I'm trying to manipulate the conversation using certain skills. But I think that's what I'm doing.
Does this connect with your process of coming out at all?
Coming out gradually started around the time I was 23. I told this one girl who liked me, and she liked me, and I was like, well, there's something I should tell you. And I liked this guy who was friend with this girl, and we three would hang out together all the time. And I was talking to her, and he was asleep, and I told her, there's something you should know. I like somebody, and he's sleeping right there. That was the first coming out moment. And then I gradually told people here and there when I felt I couldn't hide anymore. Some people noticed before I told them. I think it was around, so I'm the oldest son of the temple. Our family runs a temple. and I'm the oldest son. So I was supposed to be the successor of the temple. And grandpa had a stroke, and when that happened, mom really tried to like convince me to come back to the temple, and that's when I told her. And it's crazy, like she really like good care of me and she loved me, but I was still afraid she was gonna disown me. I didn't think she was able to handle that. I told her that I'm gay, and she actually knew already because my sister told her before I did. And after that, I didn't have much reason to like hide it anymore, I guess. I started telling everybody. And then life was a lot easier after that. That happened when I was around 27. When I was 29, the great earthquake happened. The Fukushima nuclear disaster happened. I fled Tokyo and I moved to New York.
What was that experience like for you? 29, fleeing Tokyo, going to New York.
Oh, that's crazy. When the Fukushima happened, when the nuclear explosion happened, I left Tokyo within 3 hours, expecting everybody to be getting out of Tokyo and thinking I would never come back to Tokyo again. That's because, nuclear disaster is no joke. So I was like, okay, I have to pack my stuff and get to the station as soon as possible because it's going to be impossible to leave Tokyo. Everybody's gonna try to get out at the same time, so I had to be ahead of it. But I went to the station and nobody was like, the Shinkansen train, the bullet train was so empty. Everybody stayed in Tokyo. From then on, there was this crazy 2 weeks where I'm doing a lot of research and watching news, not only from Japan, but from all over the world, and trying to see the whole picture, and just watching the Japanese television telling people like, this is not that serious, stay calm, and everybody not responding to a nuclear disaster. I was like, this is fucking crazy. I gotta get out of here.
The Fukushima nuclear disaster. It was the most severe nuclear accident since Chernobyl. Despite the fallout and all the issues surrounding, the Japanese government continues to silence the issues around the effects and dangers relating to the nuclear disaster. Like many issues that we face today, we're not dealing with the issue itself, but rather a PR issue. It's becoming a national issue about national pride. I wonder how many variations of this we have in our lives. Living with extreme situations that have no answer, the only thing we can do is to soothe ourselves in this new form of tyranny, telling ourselves that everything will be alright.
So first I left Tokyo, and then I found a little hut on top of a huge mountain in Shikoku. The mountain is called Ishizuchiyama. It's the highest mountain in Western Japan. And there was a hut on top of it. I went there and I worked there for 3 months. And then I left Japan on August 1st, 2011.
What did you do in the hut?
So climbers would come and stay. So I just like served them food, cleaned the room, cleaned the hut. It was a huge, kind of like a cottage, actually, like a huge cottage. And I did go hiking every day. I got lost once and I almost died. There was a rope, which you weren't supposed to go over that rope because it's so dangerous, but I went over it and I went down this little path that used to be a path where monks would go through as for like shugyo. How do you translate that? Like practice or training, people would die. It was a really dangerous course.
Shugyo, or in Mandarin, shoshin, is a word that is derived from the idea of deep mind-body training. I think that any kind of training could be described as shugyo, but it's more interesting the mindset that accompanies the said training that is the defining characteristic. In general, we use the term shugyo for training done in the pursuit of higher and deeper levels of consciousness, as well as the refinement of an ability. Thus, we typically refer to Buddhist trainings as shugyo. It is demanding, requiring unlimited amounts of effort, mindfulness, and refinement. The training can, for example, take form of Shaolin Gong Fu, seated meditation, zazen, archery, or artistic endeavors such as calligraphy or ikebana, flower arrangement. Ideally, however, shugosha, one practice of shugo, should extend the efforts, the energy, the concentration, and mindfulness to all aspects of their life, so that even simple tasks such as washing dishes and brushing your teeth can lead to enlightenment. It's interesting to contrast Shugyo educational model with Western industrial educational model. The Shugyo paradigm is characterized by an emphasis on depth of knowledge, wisdom, experience, technical ability. In this model, the student takes only a handful of skills or forms and repeats them time and time again. Each repetition works in a spiral and refinement until the skills deepens within the student's knowledge. The aim is total mastery over one's object of study and oneself to the point where both object and subject disappear into the void of experience and enlightenment. The linear Western industrial age paradigm is characterized by an emphasis on an accumulation of knowledge, experiences, and skills. In this model, the student usually touches the tip of many icebergs, almost never achieving mastery and rarely achieving proficiency. The aim here is to help one become well-rounded. Both has its place, neither is superior. However, in this current day and age, many jobs and tasks are being replaced by machine automation. Where does one sharpen one's skill except for the most simple menial tasks, such as drinking tea? Where would the future and the moments of enlightenment take place if they're all being replaced? So what is the next scene for you? What is in store for the next chapter of your life?
I have no idea. I have no idea. Dealing with this family thing, trying to see if I can do something positive for the temple, so that the temple is okay. I lived with a lot of sense of guilt. Right now, I feel like I'm at the lowest of my life. I feel like I have no money. I have very few things, which is great. I like having nothing, but I don't have the energy and confidence, and I don't have the optimism I used to have. I feel like I have very little things with very little options, except for this new script and some amazing friends in New York and LA. They say they're happy to let me stay if I ever choose to go back. I'm at the place where I have closed my eyes and just take a step forward and see where I land, is how I feel right now. I have my honesty.
Yeah.
There comes your sigh. What
A lifetime of
what
training.
are you how are you feeling right now?
I have a great interest in psychedelics, and also I really love this book, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And from my own experiences, I'm very in the same point. This period of this kind of very deep, dark place of a psychedelic trip where it just feels like absolute death and there's no hope, no light, nothing really makes sense.
Interesting.
It's a kind of transitional state. I'm so deep in this transitional state that, because if I know what the next step is, it's not really transitioning. I'm just part of that thing. But I'm really in this middle place where it's time for reflection, and that's as positive as I can look at it. And I'm just really going through and feeling all of these things. And looking at all of the problems and being very much sitting with it.
Listening to what you just said gives me so much energy. It's so freeing, and I like it.
It's funny because it's the opposite of a lot of the positive psychology or the kind of social brainwashing that they would put on us, which is to pretend that the world is not fucked. Just focus and on the positive. But actually, it's so terrible.
And unfriend people who complains. Unfriend people that are sad. Abandon every single person who's sad. Are you a fucking devil?
Really, that's really the current situation, and I
it's
find
cruel. It's cruel. Why can't you allow somebody to be sad? Come on. It's so frustrating.
So this period I have been very much on the focus of mourning, mourning all of these things and mourning the pain, mourning the death of myself before the illusions, and it sucks, generally speaking.
Is it painful?
But the painful is the holding on to it, the not wanting it. But on an actual long-term thing, it's general depression and boredom.
Yeah.
But within that, it's not the excitement of, excitement because I won $1 million. I have a new project that is going to make me rich and famous. But it's the excitement of like, okay, it's this. I just try to do each day at a time, and maybe something comes, maybe not.
Yeah.
The pain is when I don't have the ability to accept it. The pain is when I still don't want this.
Yeah.
I feel a bit more relieved when I stop trying so much.
Yeah.
I've been fighting to hold on to the way it was, and it's much easier now in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's also a natural response to life. That's like a natural way to deal with reality, I feel like. Because part of us are always ready for adventures and changes. Part of us long for that change, and we get so much joy from seeing different things, new things, and feeling things that you've never felt before, or like being exposed to new ideas. We love that, but at the same time, we also need the comfort, a place that you feel safe, and that comes from finding something that doesn't change, like a house or a cave, or you wash your face, you go to the same river and wash your face kind of thing. That's how you like create order in your life and build habits. When I'm in the middle of change, which is right now, it's really scary because you're letting go of that safe place, or it almost feels like it's not a choice, it's just like disappearing. Everything that used to work doesn't work anymore. So it's kind of like leaving a village, and you have to go somewhere and find another village or a place to live. So it's exciting but scary.
So what's going to happen with the transition and succession with the temple?
Oh, my brother's taking care of it now. I hope things will be okay with him and the rest of the family and the temple. The whole community, the whole village. People come to the village. The temple takes big place in their heart. It's important that the temple stays well.
Yeah, a lot of very interesting images and memories and thoughts.
Yeah? What do you see now?
I feel these days extremely trapped and extremely free at the same time. That actually nothing really matters and I don't really have anything, but at the same time feeling like the loss of being in the world flow of things, like I feel free from that, but then that freedom is also trapping me, or it's also not allowing me to have access to the power of being in that system.
How long have you been in Berlin?
3 years.
What do you like do like daily? What's your life like?
I left New York 3 years ago when I had a very strong breakdown of my life, my relationship breakdown, work breakdown.
Yikes.
And so I left New York. I was in Berlin, but I was still traveling back and forth, and I would still work in the States a lot.
Okay.
Berlin became this therapy, my place to go and retreat.
Right.
And in Berlin, I was really just exploring myself. I was doing therapy, I was reading, I was thinking, writing, making music, going to sex parties, doing sexual explorations.
Oh, fun.
So really opening myself up and exploring in every possible way, trying different sports, trying different things, and just
What sports did you like?
I did kite surfing, doing some Muay Thai, or I went to ride motorbikes It sounds like a midlife crisis, but I think this midlife crisis, I find it a bit sexist and a bit offensive, because it's essentially when a man decides to do something for himself, it's looked down upon.
That's so true.
But if a woman does something for herself, it's wellness. So, but I enjoyed it thoroughly. I spent the money that I earned. I felt simultaneously guilty and stressed and simultaneously opening up.
Yeah.
A big part of that time was just reflecting and thinking and reading a lot.
Right.
I was actively reading a lot, very heavily.
What are the things you tend to read?
What happened was in New York, it would bother me to speak, and I was working also a lot within fashion and advertising. And it bothered me that a lot of people would say, no, I don't read. I just watch shows or movies and stuff like that, and just a very dull mind. And I found it really disturbing. And so I started to just thought, okay, well then if I think that's problematic, well then how much am I reading? And I read a bit back then, but then these last 3 years I really just started heavily reading, and I would just dive into stuff not to show off, but just whatever was building my interest. And so first I wanted to understand why I was having those issues in my relationship. So I started to dive into relationship books. I started to dive into psychology. I started to dive into various forms of ideas of mental illness. Then I started to dive into away from mental illness and look at psychology, look at politics, the politics of psychology. And then I started to get into sociology and economics and reading history and then linguistics. And then I would look into hypnosis and sociology and sexuality. And it was really fun to look into that and just go where my interest goes from one book to the next. But then that period also allowed me to be quite free with people, because I felt no longer to participate so much in a previous way of heteronormative behavior. And that freed me to a certain amount. But then at certain points, if I connect with people, at certain point the relationship would need to go beyond a fantasy projection. And then it would reveal both of the difference of me and certain people, because I was so far from what people were very busy with on a daily basis. Because my daily basis was not very relatable for a working class German environment or for anybody, because I was just mostly reading or hanging out or sitting or going surfing or something,
like the idol life.
But also it was very alienating, So that was the first 2 years, I would say, in Berlin. And then this last year was really the pandemic. It was amazing. But it's also
I kind of like that. That's kind of how I live my life all the time.
You just do what you want.
I never had a job in my life. I don't get me wrong. I worked for rent and stuff, but I never took a real job except for acting. And even for acting, I don't really look at it as a job. It's a hobby.
On the other hand, I'm trying to find a way, and I think this is what I'm doing now with podcasting, is to regain an entry with people, because I was just so fearful. I didn't want to be seen or see people.
I see.
And what's funny with the pandemic is that I just pretty much stayed much more internal and much more reduced mobility. And I just... staying in this, and so this last year has been very much even more intensified at homeness, and slowly connecting, and now I'm getting quite excited to develop these kind of interactions. And so, for example, you and I having these conversations, and I'm very inspired by your scripts and what you're talking about, and I'm thinking about ways to create new interactions in these kind of projects. But like you said, everything that was working the way it was no longer works. And I'm trying to understand how, in this current position, what my relationship is to it. Like, what is something that I can do that I feel acceptable for my morals, current morals.
Yeah. Sounds like you're allowing yourself to grow. You know bonsai, right? Do you know bonsai? Bonsai is the Japanese, like those little trees, and you keep it in small pot and they stay small, right? Like you can do that to plants. Like you can stop it from growing and it keeps the beautiful shape, and there's something very beautiful about it. But also, if you want to grow, then you have to take it out of the pot and you have to plant it elsewhere and it grows.
Do you ever feel like a bonsai?
I have never been a bonsai. I almost feel like I keep chopping myself down so that I can start from the sprout. But, it's not like I'm always starting from zero. It's like the shape and form is always different, but there's consistency there. And people who know me for a long time would see that, like a continuous growth within that process of chopping myself down and starting from the sprout. I hope. I hope. I mean, I think naturally, like, because, I'm a human, so I'm not a plant, so I can't literally chop myself down. I'm getting tired of it. I'm sick and tired of living like this, but I also feel like, yeah, this lifestyle is the worst except for any other lifestyle. That's what Churchill said about democracy or capitalism. He said democracy or capitalism is the worst system except for every other system before.
Normal people get denied visas. Talk less about you.
You look so young. You Asians never age.
For a while, I didn't count microaggressions as racist comments, but I do remember being a young girl and all the little girls had to wear lipstick for a play, and the parents, any time they saw me, called me a little China doll. I've just been called exotic or asked why I have an Italian name when I have these eyes.
I usually got comments like, "You are so tall as a Chinese person," or "You are so articulated as an Asian."
A white male professor to a diverse class of students, including a number of Asians from various parts of Asia. The Chinese students here, ni hao.
I was walking down the street once and a guy came behind me and said ni hao, and then when he saw my face, he apologized, and that kind of struck me as so ridiculous. The fact that he would apologize to me just because I wasn't what he thought I was.
When will they close the fresh market in Wuhan? It's so annoying that eating bat and frog. That's disgusting.
Why don't you go die?
Tranny, faggot, you top? Don't touch my stuff. I don't want to become gay. You're not a woman, you delusional piece of shit.
You were born with shit in your mouth.
You top? Don't stare at him, it's rude. Don't get the surgery, men won't like you anymore.
A white student referring to two very distinct Nigerian students in our design class after 2 whole years of being in the same class. Wow. This whole time, I thought they were the same person. They look exactly the same. How can they not be the same person?
One of my mom's Singaporean friends said to her, "It's a shame you're so short and dark."
You have chingchong eyes.
What? You have friends from the Philippines? I thought China and the Philippines are the biggest enemies.
Your English is very good.
You're African. You should make more African work.
When I first got promoted to assistant store manager, I got told that my people should be working in the storeroom packing boxes.
Recent times I've been cyber harassed a lot, maybe once a month. I get DMs constantly about how just this week Asian women perpetuate and enable white supremacists by dating white men. The fact that I want my body to be colonized.
It's absurd when someone asks where you're from, then disagrees with your reply. No, you look like you're from the Philippines because of your eye shape and your skin.
A white male staff imitating my Nigerian accent at work. Hey, come and confirm my pledge. My pledge. Big Nigerian hippopotamus.
Something that happened to me often, people looked at my eyes, they would call them chinky. An eye doctor once said I had astigmatism like an Asian.
I see you're the one playing the nice, loud music from your studio. I love that for you.
When I would voice concerns about police brutality, things happening in the community, policing of black women's bodies, or trying to protect people in my own neighborhood from police brutality, I would be met with, and this was a recent partner, I would be met with comments about how my anger was actually making things worse, or that there was a reason why this was happening to black people and not other people, and that actually the more black people talked about race, the more racist we seemed.
The additional voices you heard at the beginning and at the end of this episode are shared from a black college student living in Belgium, Lee Bullet, Fan Popo, Lulu Yaojo Yellow, Lu Yan, Ekanemeka Maduka, Tom, Michaela Mavauzil, Tu Ao, as well as other anonymous people. Thank you for opening your hearts and sharing your stories. That was a conversation between myself, Ayoto Ataraxia, with Junshin Soga. You can find out more about Junshin and connect with him with the links I will provide on asianprovocation.com, as well as the full transcription. Asian Provocation is a queer conversational podcast sharing invisible ideas and stories with a focus on Asian diaspora. Links to the episode as well as other information can be accessed on asianprovocation.com. Asian Provocation is produced by yours truly, Ayoto Ataraxia. Music on this episode is by 369, Autonomous Electronic, Dew of Light, Gabriel Parker, and field recordings are by Junshin Soga in Hiroshima. If you'd like to share your story, you can do so anonymously, as well as being credited by connecting with me on Instagram at asian.provocation, as well as on Twitter at ap_pod. This is an independent, listener-supported podcast. You can donate on asianprovocation.com, as well as subscribe monthly on patreon.com to help bring in conversations and stories about people in diaspora.